Captain Daeho Kim stared at the massive Calvarian space station through the viewing screen of his ship. The moonlight shadow hung in empty space like a ghost, completely invisible to every scanner the aliens possessed. 3 months had passed, since the Third Fleet died screaming in the void, and still the Calvarians refused to understand what they faced. The bridge was quiet except for the soft hum of life support systems. Daeho watched alien ships move in perfect formation around Nexus Station, their hulls gleaming with the pride of a species that had never truly lost a war. They had no idea a human vessel sat less than 500 kilometers away, recording their every movement. "Captain, we are receiving new fleet movement data," said Lieutenant Su Jin at the communications station. Her voice was barely above a whisper, though the aliens could not hear them even if she shouted. "Admiral Park wants a full tactical assessment." Within the hour. Daeho nodded and moved to the tactical display. Red dots showed Calvarian positions while blue icons marked human forces scattered across 3 star systems. The numbers looked bad for humanity. But Daeho knew numbers meant nothing when your enemy could not see you coming. On the far side of the Calvarian home system, Elder Taemin stood before the High Council with ancient texts clutched in his weathered hands. The old Calvarian had lived for over 3 centuries, and his memory reached back to stories his own grandfather had told him as a child. Stories about the quiet death that walked between stars. Stories about humans. "Honored council members, you must listen," Taemin said, his voice shaking with age and desperation. "The ancient warnings speak of a species that fights not with strength but with shadows. They do not roar before they strike. They do not announce their presence. They simply appear when all hope is gone, and then they disappear, leaving only silence behind." General Wu Jin laughed from his seat at the council table. His massive frame was covered in scars from a dozen wars, and his eyes held nothing but contempt for the old elder. "Stories for children, old one. We have seen these humans fight. They are primitive but lucky, nothing more." The other council members murmured agreement. They had all heard the reports from the Third Fleet survivors. Humans used crude weapons and simple tactics. Yes, they had won, but only through accident and the incompetence of Fleet Admiral Carthon. Taemin opened one of his ancient books and pointed to a page covered in symbols that predated the Calvarian space age. Here it says, "They are patient hunters who wait for the perfect moment. Here it warns that they turn our strength against us. And here," his finger moved to another passage, "it says they make us destroy ourselves while they watch from the shadows." "Enough!" Wu Jin slammed his fist on the table. "We have the largest fleet in Calvarian history ready to launch. We have weapons that can crack planets and shields that can stop stars. What can these monkey descendants do against such power?" Back on the moonlight shadow, Daeho received his answer to that very question. The tactical analysis was complete, and Admiral Park wanted to see it immediately. The secure communication channel crackled to life, and Admiral Bo-Ram Park's face appeared on screen. "Report, Captain Kim," Park said. Her voice carried the weight of 40 years in space, 20 of them spent preparing for this exact moment. "The Calvarians are massing their entire battle fleet at Nexus Station," Daeho replied. "Current count shows over 2,000 ships of various classes, including 12 planet killers and their flagship, the Eternal Victory." Park smiled, but it was not a pleasant expression. Intelligence was right then. "They are planning to hit New Busan with everything they have." "Yes, Admiral. They believe it is lightly defended. And what do our deep scan probes show about their tactical doctrine?" Daeho pulled up another display. They still use the traditional Calvarian hammer formation, mass their heavy ships in the center, use light cruisers for flanking, and rely on overwhelming firepower to break enemy lines. "The same tactics they have used for 3,000 years, Park said. "The same tactics that won them an empire, the same tactics that will destroy them." On Nexus Station, General Wu Jin stood before a massive holographic display showing the planned attack route to New Busan. The human colony was 7 days away at maximum warp, and intelligence suggested it held only 3 million humans with minimal defenses. "The perfect target," Wu Jin told his staff officers. "We will crush their spirit with one decisive blow. When news reaches Earth that an entire human world has been reduced to ash, they will surrender immediately. War Chief Dong-Su, a younger Calvarian with ambition burning in his eyes, stepped forward. General, what if the elders are right? What if humans are more dangerous than we think? Wu Jin turned slowly to face the war chief. His expression was calm, but his eyes promised violence. Are you questioning the wisdom of this council? No, General. I merely suggest caution. The time for caution ended when they destroyed our third fleet. Now we show these primitives what real power looks like. Unknown to the Calvarians, every word of their conversation was being recorded by human listening devices planted throughout. Nexus Station. The devices were so small and used such advanced technology that Calvarian sensors registered them as background radiation. Specialist Yun Ji-han sat in a bunker deep beneath New Busan's surface, surrounded by communication equipment that could intercept transmissions from across the galaxy. She listened to Calvarian battle plans with the patience of someone who knew the enemy was walking into a trap. Admiral Park, they are definitely coming here first, Yunji reported through quantum communication. General Wu Jin wants to make an example of New Busan. Perfect, Park replied. How long until their fleet arrives? 7 days if they maintain current speed. More than enough time. Begin Phase 2. Across New Busan, what appeared to be a simple farming colony began to change. Underground bunkers opened to reveal weapon platforms that had been hidden for months. Orbital defense satellites that had been disguised as communication relays powered up their particle beam arrays. Minefields that looked like asteroid debris activated their targeting systems. Captain Jae Sung led his Marine battalion through final preparations in an underground facility that officially did not exist. His soldiers checked equipment that was supposedly impossible for humans to build. Weapons that could punch through Calvarian armor like paper. Shields that could deflect energy blasts capable of melting cities. Remember the plan, Jae Sung told his troops. Let them land. Let them think they are winning. Draw them deep into the prepared zones, then close the trap. Elder Taemin made one final attempt to reach the High Council, but the guards would not let him enter the chamber. Through the sealed doors he could hear Wu Jin giving final orders for the attack. The old Calvarian pressed his hand against the cold metal and whispered an ancient prayer for forgiveness. On the moonlight shadow, Captain Daeho watched the massive Calvarian fleet begin to move. 2,000 ships arranged in perfect formation, their engines blazing like small stars as they accelerated toward the jump point. They looked magnificent and unstoppable, exactly as they were meant to look. Signal Admiral Park, Daeho ordered. Tell her the hammer is falling. The Calvarian fleet jumped to hyperspace in a display of coordinated precision that would have impressed any military observer. They were confident in their strength, certain of victory, and completely unaware that they were flying toward the most elaborate trap in galactic history. As the last enemy ship disappeared into hyperspace, Daeho allowed himself a small smile. Soon the Calvarians would learn what Elder Taemin had been trying to tell them. Humans did not fight wars the way other species expected. Humans made war itself into a weapon, turning enemy strength into weakness and confidence into catastrophic error. The hunt was beginning and the prey had no idea they were already caught. Admiral Boram Park stood in the command center of humanity's most secret military facility, buried 3 kilometers beneath the surface of Luna. Around her, dozens of officers worked at stations displaying real-time intelligence from across known space. The facility had been built in absolute secrecy over 20 years, preparing for this exact moment. Commander Lee, what is the status of our psychological warfare assessment? Park asked as she approached a bank of computers showing alien behavioral patterns. Commander So-Young Lee looked up from her analysis. Her expertise in xenopsychology had taken 15 years to develop, studying captured Calvarian communications and cultural data. Admiral, we have identified 3 distinct response patterns among Calvarian subspecies. The warrior castes will fight to extinction rather than surrender. The merchant classes will negotiate when faced with overwhelming loss. The civilian populations will submit immediately to superior technology demonstrations. Park nodded, and Moved to the next station where Dr. Hyunwoo Choi was reviewing psychological profiles of key Calvarian leaders. The doctor had spent his entire career learning how alien minds worked, particularly how they responded to fear and confusion. "Doctor, what can you tell me about their command structure?" Park asked. "The Calvarians operate on a rigid hierarchy, system based on combat achievements," Choi replied, highlighting names on his display. General Wu Jin earned his position by conquering 17 worlds in the Outer Rim Wars. War Chief Dong-Su is ambitious but inexperienced. Elder Taemin represents old knowledge that their current leadership actively rejects. And their weakness? Pride, Admiral. Their entire culture is built on the belief that they are the superior military force in the galaxy. They cannot conceive of a species that fights differently than they do. When we demonstrate technological superiority they did not expect, their psychological response will be complete paralysis. Across the galaxy, the Calvarian war fleet continued its journey toward New Busan. General Wu Jin stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Victory, watching stars streak past as they traveled through hyperspace. His confidence had only grown during the voyage as reports came in from his scouts. New Busan shows minimal energy signatures, reported his intelligence officer. 3 small cities, extensive agricultural areas, and what appears to be a single orbital defense platform. Total human military presence is estimated at fewer than 50,000 troops. War Chief Dong-Su stood beside the general, but his expression showed doubt rather than confidence. During the journey, he had been reading files that most Calvarians ignored. Historical records from the Great Archives that mentioned species called star killers and void hunters. "General, I have been studying our archives," Dong-Su said carefully. "There are references to humans dating back over 5,000 years. The descriptions match what Elder Taemin tried to tell the council." Wu Jin turned with irritation clear on his face. "You have been reading fairy tales, War Chief. Focus on reality. We face primitives with crude weapons who got lucky once." But Dong-Su had found something else in the archives, something that made his blood run cold. Ancient battle reports describing human tactics that seemed impossible. Enemies who appeared from nowhere, struck without warning and vanished before retaliation was possible. Entire fleets that simply disappeared, leaving only empty space where thousands of ships had been moments before. On Luna, engineer Mi Young-yoon finished her final calibrations on humanity's secret weapon systems. The technology had been developed in secret for decades, reverse-engineered from artifacts found in ancient ruins on dead worlds, worlds that had once belonged to species that fought humans and lost. "Admiral Park, all systems are green," Mi Young reported. "We can now access and control any Calvarian technology that uses their standard quantum frequencies. Their own weapons can be turned against them at will." Park smiled. This was the key to everything. Humans had not just studied Calvarian technology, they had learned to dominate it. Every ship in the approaching fleet could be neutralized without firing a single shot. "How long have we had this capability?" asked Commander Lee. 18 months, Park replied. "We could have ended their civilization at any point since then, but that would not have taught them the lesson they need to learn." Elder Taemin sat alone in his chambers, no longer trying to warn anyone who would not listen. Instead, he studied the oldest records in the Calvarian archives, documents so ancient that most of his species had forgotten they existed. The records spoke of a time before the Calvarian Empire, when their ancestors lived in fear of shadows that moved between stars. The documents described humans exactly, though they used different names. The patient ones who waited centuries to strike. The invisible fleet that appeared without warning. The mind breakers, who turned civilizations against themselves. According to the records, humans had ended at least 12 galactic empires, not through conquest but by demonstrating that resistance was futile. Taemin found one passage that chilled him to his core. It described how humans would allow their enemies to mass their entire military force, then eliminate it so completely that surrender became the only rational choice. The pattern was always the same. First, humans would appear weak and vulnerable. Second, the enemy would commit everything to one decisive battle. Third, Humans would reveal capabilities that made continued resistance impossible. On New Busan, Captain Jae-sung conducted final inspections of defenses that existed in plain sight but remained invisible to Calvarian sensors. What appeared to be farm equipment could transform into artillery positions. Civilian buildings contained weapon systems powerful enough to destroy battleships. Underground bunkers held armies of soldiers equipped with technology decades ahead of anything the Calvarians possessed. "How many do you think will survive the initial demonstration?" asked his second-in-command. "Enough to carry word back to their empire," Jae-sung replied. "That is the point. We want survivors who can describe what they witnessed." The psychological component was crucial. Humans had learned that destroying an enemy completely taught nothing to other potential enemies. But allowing a few survivors to return with tales of impossible human capabilities would spread fear throughout the galaxy faster than any propaganda campaign. Specialist Yoon Ji-han monitored Calvarian communications as their fleet approached New Busan. The enemy was maintaining perfect formation, following standard attack protocols that humans had studied for decades. Every move they made had been anticipated and prepared for. "Admiral Park, the Calvarian fleet will arrive in 16 hours, Yoonji reported. "They are broadcasting victory messages to their home worlds, promising swift triumph over human forces." "Perfect," Park replied. "The more confident they are, the greater their shock will be when reality sets in." War Chief Dong-soo stood in his private quarters aboard the Eternal Victory, studying holographic displays of ancient Calvarian texts. One passage stood out above all others. It was a warning written by survivors of humanity's last great demonstration of power, 5,000 years ago. "They do not conquer," the passage read. "They teach. They do not destroy civilizations. They show civilizations how to destroy themselves. They do not announce their presence with threats or demands. They simply wait until you have committed everything you have. Then they show you why that was a mistake. Beware the humans, for they fight wars with patience itself as their weapon." Dong-soo realized that his entire species was about to receive a lesson they would never forget. The question was whether enough of them would survive to benefit from that lesson. General Wu Jin reviewed final attack plans as they approached the New Busan system. Everything looked perfect. His massive fleet would overwhelm the pathetic human defenses within hours. The colony would be reduced to ashes and humanity would understand the price of defying the Calvarian Empire. He had no idea that every aspect of his plan was being monitored by human intelligence. He did not know that his own weapon systems had been compromised. He could not imagine that his overwhelming force was about to become a demonstration of human superiority that would echo through the galaxy for centuries. The Calvarian fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the New Busan system, and for a moment, everything seemed to go according to plan. The human colony lay before them, apparently defenseless and vulnerable. But in that same moment, deep beneath New Busan's surface, Admiral Park gave the order that would change galactic history forever. "Begin the lesson," she said quietly, and, across human space, systems that had waited decades for activation came online at last. The Calvarian war fleet emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, 2,000 ships arranged in the traditional hammer pattern that had conquered dozens of worlds. General Wu Jin stood on the bridge of the Eternal Victory, watching the peaceful blue world of New Busan rotate slowly before them. The human colony looked exactly as intelligence had reported, defenseless and vulnerable. "Begin long-range scans," Wu Jin ordered. "I want complete tactical information before we commence bombardment." War Chief Dong-soo watched the scanner, displays with growing unease. Something felt wrong about this entire situation, though he could not identify exactly what disturbed him. The human colony showed normal energy signatures for a farming world, but there was something too perfect about the readings. "General, the scans show minimal defensive positions," reported the sensor operator. "One orbital platform, scattered, ground installations, and approximately 50,000 human troops concentrated in 3 main population centers." Wu Jin smiled with satisfaction. "Exactly as predicted. We will demonstrate Calvarian power by eliminating this pathetic resistance in less than 1 hour." Deep beneath New Busan's surface, Admiral Park monitored the Calvarian fleet through sensors. They could not detect. The enemy had positioned themselves exactly where human strategic planners had hoped they would. Every ship in their formation was now within range of weapons systems that officially did not exist. "All stations report ready," announced Commander Lee from her position at the tactical display. "Phase 1 can begin on your command." Park nodded to Captain Jae Sung, who was coordinating ground operations from the underground command center. "Captain, begin the performance. Make it look convincing." Above ground, what appeared to be desperate human defenders scrambled to defensive positions that looked hastily prepared, but were actually carefully designed killing zones. The few visible weapons installations powered up with energy signatures. That suggested outdated human technology, exactly as Calvarian intelligence expected. General Wu Jin watched human preparations with contempt. "Look at them running like frightened animals. They know their end has come." The Calvarian fleet moved into bombardment formation, maintaining perfect discipline as they had been trained. Each ship took its assigned position, creating overlapping fields of fire that would reduce the planet's surface to molten glass within minutes. "Commence bombardment," Wu Jin ordered. The first wave of Calvarian energy beams lanced down toward New Busan, striking what appeared to be the colony's primary defensive installations. Massive explosions bloomed across the planet's surface, and for a moment it seemed as if the battle was proceeding exactly as planned. Then something impossible happened. The explosions faded, revealing that the human installations were completely undamaged. Energy shields that should not have existed flickered briefly around each target, showing technology decades beyond anything Calvarians possessed. "What?" Wu Jin stared at his displays in confusion. "That is impossible. Our weapons can crack planetary crusts." War Chief Dong Su felt ice form in his stomach. "General, perhaps we should reconsider our approach." "Nonsense. Increase power to maximum. Concentrate all fire on a single target." The Calvarian fleet focused their combined firepower on one human defensive position, unleashing enough energy to vaporize a mountain. When the light faded, the installation remained completely intact, protected by shield technology that made Calvarian defenses look primitive by comparison. Engineer Mi Young-yoon monitored the enemy attack from her control station beneath New Busan. The Calvarian weapons were impressive but useless against shields powered by technology they could not begin to understand. "Admiral, they are using approximately 12% of their maximum firepower," Mi Young reported. "Should we continue the demonstration?" "Not yet," Park replied. "Let them commit everything they have first." On the Eternal Victory, General Wu Jin was beginning to experience something he had never felt before in combat: genuine fear. His most powerful weapons were having no effect whatsoever on human defenses. "All ships, implement attack pattern Omega," he commanded. "Every vessel will concentrate maximum firepower on the largest human city." The entire Calvarian fleet opened fire simultaneously, creating a beam of destructive energy that could have shattered a moon. The beam struck New Busan's capital city and disappeared harmlessly into shield generators that absorbed the energy as if it were sunlight. War Chief Dong Su remembered passages from the ancient archives describing exactly this scenario. Humans allowing their enemies to exhaust themselves against impossible defenses, demonstrating technological superiority so complete that continued resistance became obviously futile. "General, we must withdraw immediately," Dong Su said urgently. "This is exactly what the Elder warned us about." Wu Jin turned on his subordinate with fury in his eyes. "We do not retreat from primitives. All ships prepare for ground assault. We will take this world with soldiers if weapons will not suffice." This was the moment Admiral Park had been waiting for. The Calvarians were about to commit their ground forces to what they thought was a standard planetary invasion. They had no idea they were landing in the most sophisticated trap ever constructed. "Captain Jae Sung, the enemy is coming down to meet you," Park announced. "Begin Phase 2. On New Busan's surface, Captain Jae Sung watched Calvarian dropships descend through the atmosphere in perfect formation. The enemy was following standard invasion protocols, exactly as human planners had anticipated. "All units, remember your assignments," Jae Sung transmitted to his forces. "Let them establish beachheads. Draw them inland. Make them think they are winning until we spring the final trap. The first Calvarian soldiers landed near New Busan's primary city and immediately began advancing toward what appeared to be hastily constructed human defensive positions. The human defenders seemed to be falling back in disorder, abandoning position after position to the advancing aliens. Sub-Commander Chan Wu led the first wave of Calvarian troops, feeling confidence return, as human resistance crumbled before his forces. Command, we have broken through their outer perimeter. Human forces are in full retreat. General Wu Jin felt satisfaction replace his earlier fear. Excellent. Continue the advance. Show these primitives what real soldiers can accomplish. What Chan Wu and his troops did not realize was that every step of their advance was being guided by human strategic planning. The retreating defenders were drawing the Calvarian forces deeper into prepared killing zones, while underground sensors tracked every enemy movement. Captain Jae Sung watched the tactical display as Calvarian ground forces spread across New Busan's surface in exactly the pattern human commanders had predicted. The enemy was following their doctrine perfectly, concentrating forces for maximum impact while maintaining supply lines to their landing zones. All positions report enemy forces in optimal locations, reported his tactical officer. We can begin elimination sequences at any time. Not yet, Jae Sung replied. Let them commit their reserves first. Above in orbit, General Wu Jin was becoming increasingly confident as reports came in from the surface. Human resistance appeared to be collapsing everywhere, with Calvarian forces advancing rapidly toward all major population centers. War Chief, it seems your concerns about these humans were unfounded, Wu Jin said to Dongsu. They fight like any other inferior species when faced with superior force. But Dongsu was studying tactical displays with growing horror. The pattern of human retreats was too perfect, too coordinated. It looked exactly like descriptions from the ancient archives of how humans had destroyed the legendary hegemony. Empire. General, this is a trap, Dongsu said desperately. We must recall all ground forces immediately. Absolutely not. Victory is within our grasp. On New Busan's surface, Sub-Commander Chan Wu led his troops through what appeared to be abandoned human settlements. The buildings seemed hastily evacuated, with personal belongings scattered about as if the inhabitants had fled in panic. What Chan Wu did not know was that every building contained hidden weapon systems. Every street was mined with explosives that could be triggered remotely, and every apparent piece of debris was actually a concealed sensor or defensive position. This is too easy, muttered one of his soldiers as they advanced through empty streets. Chan Wu was beginning to have the same thought. According to intelligence, New Busan held 3 million humans, but they had encountered fewer than 10,000 defenders. Where was everyone else? The answer came when Captain Jae Sung finally gave the order that ended the charade. All units execute trap closure. Show them what they are really facing. Across New Busan's surface, the abandoned buildings suddenly came alive with weapon systems that materialized from seemingly empty air. Streets exploded upward to reveal massive defensive installations that had been hidden beneath the surface, the sky filled with human aircraft that had been invisible to Calvarian sensors. In orbit, General Wu Jin watched in horror as his ground forces found themselves surrounded by human technology that should not have existed. Energy weapons more advanced than anything in Calvarian arsenals began systematically eliminating his troops. Impossible, he whispered as casualty reports flooded in. Where did all of this come from? War Chief Dongsu knew the answer. General, we have walked into exactly the kind of trap that Admiral Sung Ho commanded what remained of the Calvarian 3rd Assault Squadron, the only ships that had managed to escape the catastrophe at New Busan. His fleet had been reduced from 50 vessels to 12 battered survivors, and the images his sensors had recorded would haunt him for the rest of his life. The humans had not just defeated the largest Calvarian war fleet in history, they had made it destroy itself while demonstrating technological capabilities that seemed impossible. Sung Ho had watched in horror as his own weapons turned against him, controlled by some form of human technology that could override Calvarian command systems at will. Admiral, we are receiving demands for immediate surrender from High Command, reported his communications officer. They want to know why we abandoned our positions. Shung-ho stared out at the stars, knowing that no one back home would believe what had really happened. Tell them we will provide a full report when we reach safe harbor. But first, we have something more important to do. The surviving ships changed course toward the Outer Rim territories where Elder Taemin had been exiled after the High Council rejected his warnings. If anyone could explain what they had witnessed, it would be the old keeper of ancient knowledge. On New Busan, the cleanup was already beginning. Human recovery teams moved through areas where Calvarian forces had been eliminated, collecting technology and intelligence data. The battle had lasted less than 4 hours from start to finish, and human casualties numbered exactly 0. Specialist Yoon Ji-han monitored Calvarian communications from her listening post as news of the defeat spread throughout their empire. The reaction was exactly what human psychological experts had predicted. Complete disbelief followed by desperate attempts to understand how such a massive fleet could simply vanish. Admiral Park, Calvarian communications are showing signs of severe psychological stress, Yoon-ji reported. Multiple commanders are requesting immediate withdrawal from human-controlled space. Several colonial governors are asking about surrender procedures. Park nodded with satisfaction. And their military leadership? General Wu Jin has been recalled to face court-martial. War Chief Dong Su is apparently searching for historical records about previous human conflicts. The High Council has declared a state of emergency. This was proceeding exactly as human strategists had planned. The complete technological superiority demonstrated at New Busan was designed to shatter Calvarian confidence and make continued resistance seem pointless. Elder Taemin sat in his simple dwelling on the forgotten world of Refuge Prime, studying the same ancient texts he had been reading for decades. The holographic displays showed passages written by survivors of humanity's previous encounters with galactic civilizations. When Admiral Sung-ho's ships arrived in orbit, Taemin was not surprised. He had been expecting someone to seek him out, ever since news of New Busan reached the outer territories. "Elder, we need to speak with you immediately," Sung-ho transmitted from his flagship. "What happened at New Busan was exactly what you tried to warn us about." Taemin activated his personal transport and traveled up to the Admiral's ship. When he arrived on the bridge, he found Sung-ho and his remaining officers studying tactical recordings of the battle with expressions of complete bewilderment. "They made our own weapons attack us," Sung-ho said without preamble. "How is such a thing possible?" Taemin moved to the holographic display and began calling up files that most Calvarians had forgotten existed. "Admiral, what you witnessed was not a battle. It was a demonstration. Humans do not fight wars the way other species fight wars." The ancient records began to play, showing accounts from civilizations that had encountered humans over the previous 5,000 years. Each account told the same basic story. A species that seemed primitive and vulnerable until the moment they revealed capabilities that made resistance impossible. The Hegemony Empire controlled over 10,000 worlds, Taemin explained as historical data filled the display. They had weapons that could destroy solar systems and defenses that had never been breached. When they encountered humans, they decided to eliminate this potential threat immediately. Sung-ho watched footage of hegemony fleets that made his own forces look pathetic by comparison. What happened to them? They committed their entire military to one decisive strike against what appeared to be a small human colony. The humans allowed them to land, let them establish positions, and then demonstrated technology so advanced that continued resistance became obviously futile. The parallels to New Busan were unmistakable. Admiral Sung-ho felt his blood turn to ice as he realized his entire species had just repeated a mistake that had doomed dozens of other civilizations. "The humans did not conquer the hegemony," Taemin continued. "They simply showed them what would happen if they continued to fight. The hegemony surrendered immediately and accepted human terms, which were surprisingly generous." On another forgotten world, Prophet Insu emerged from the deep archives where he had been researching human encounters for over a century. The old Calvarian had access to records that even Elder Taemin did not know existed, documents sealed away by previous governments that found them too disturbing to acknowledge. Insu activated his long-range communicator and sent an encrypted message to Elder Taemin. "Brother, the time has come to reveal everything. The humans are following the same pattern they have used for millennia. The message contained holographic evidence that would terrify any military leader who understood its implications. Humans had been observing and studying Calvarian civilization for over 200 years, learning their tactics, analyzing their psychology, and preparing for exactly this moment. Back on Admiral Seung-ho's ship, Elder Taemin received Prophet Insu's transmission and began displaying the most classified information in Calvarian history. Records showing that humans had infiltrated their space decades ago, had been monitoring their communications, and had even influenced some of their political decisions. "They have been watching us the entire time," Taemin said quietly. "Every military exercise, every technological development, every strategic doctrine we created, they knew about it before we did." Seung-ho stared at the evidence with growing horror. How long have they been preparing for this moment? According to these records, humans began planning for contact with our civilization over 50 years ago. They studied our culture, learned our languages, and identified our weaknesses long before we even knew they existed. The tactical implications were staggering. Humans had not just won a military engagement, they had orchestrated the entire conflict from beginning to end. The Calvarian attack on New Busan had proceeded exactly according to human expectations, because humans had been guiding Calvarian strategic thinking for decades. Specialist Yoon Ji-han continued monitoring Calvarian communications as panic spread throughout their empire. Military commanders were demanding explanations that their governments could not provide. Colonial administrators were asking why their fleets had been sent to fight an enemy that possessed impossible technology. "Admiral Park, we are detecting increased communication between Elder Taemin and other Calvarian historical experts," Yoon-ji reported. "It appears they are sharing classified information about previous human encounters." Park considered this development carefully. "Good. The more they understand about what they are facing, the easier this will be for everyone." Prophet Insu arrived at Refuge Prime to join Elder Taemin and Admiral Seung-ho in their analysis of human capabilities. The three Calvarians represented the sum total of their species' knowledge about humanity's true nature. "The pattern is always the same," Insu explained as he displayed records from dozens of previous human encounters. "First, humans appear weak and vulnerable. Second, the enemy commits everything to what seems like an easy victory. Third, humans reveal capabilities that make continued resistance pointless. Fourth, humans offer surprisingly generous surrender." Master Admiral Seung-ho studied the records with the growing realization that his species faced a choice between surrender and extinction. What do the surrender terms usually include? Autonomy for most worlds, restrictions on military capabilities, and integration into human-controlled space, Taemin replied. But the key point is that civilizations that accept these terms continue to exist. Those that refuse are never heard from again. The message was clear. Humans did not conquer other species through military force. They educated them about the futility of resistance. The demonstration at New Busan was designed to teach the Calvarians that continued fighting would only result in their complete destruction. "We must contact the High Council immediately," Seung-ho said. "They need to understand what we are really facing." But even as he spoke, reports were arriving that the Calvarian government was preparing for total war rather than negotiation. General Wu Jin had been replaced by War Chief Dong Su, who was mobilizing every remaining ship in the empire for a final assault on human space. Elder Taemin closed his ancient texts with a sense of profound sadness. "They still do not understand. The humans gave us every opportunity to choose wisdom over pride." Prophet Insu activated his communicator and began broadcasting to every Calvarian receiver in. The Calvarian Empire was tearing itself apart. 3 months after the New Busan demonstration, their civilization had fractured into dozen different factions, each choosing a different response to the human threat that now hung over their entire species. President Yu Jin-song stood in the United Earth Council chambers, reviewing reports from human intelligence services scattered across Calvarian space. The psychological warfare campaign was proceeding exactly as planned, but she took no satisfaction in watching an entire civilization struggle with the implications of their own insignificance. Madam President, we have identified 3 primary Calvarian response groups, reported Director Park from Military Intelligence. Approximately 30% are demanding immediate peace negotiations. 40% have fled to distant star systems beyond our current sphere of influence. The remaining 30% are preparing for what they call a final glorious battle. Song nodded grimly. And their leadership? War Chief Dong-Su has replaced the entire High Council with military commanders who refuse to accept surrender. They are gathering every remaining ship for an assault on Earth itself. This was the moment Song had been dreading. Despite every demonstration of human superiority, despite every warning from their own elders, a significant portion of the Calvarian military remained convinced that honor was more important than survival. On the bridge of his flagship, War Chief Dong-Su studied holographic displays showing the largest fleet in Calvarian history. Over 5,000 ships from across their empire had answered his call for volunteers in what he openly acknowledged would be a suicide mission against Earth. War Chief, our scouts report that human defenses around Earth are minimal, reported his intelligence officer. It appears they are not expecting our attack. Dong-Su had read the ancient archives. He understood exactly what humans were capable of, but he also understood that some things were more important than survival. If the Calvarian Empire was going to end, it would end with honor rather than surrender. All ships maintain formation, Dong-Su commanded. We go to meet our destiny. Unknown to the Calvarian fleet, every aspect of their approach was being monitored by human intelligence systems. President Song received real-time updates as the enemy armada moved through hyperspace toward Earth. Madam President, should we intercept them before they reach the Sol system? Asked Admiral Park. Song considered the options carefully. No, let them come. It is time to end this demonstration permanently. Colonel Junho led humanity's most elite special operations unit on what would become the most important mission in galactic history. His team had spent months preparing for surgical strikes that would end Calvarian resistance without unnecessary destruction. Remember, our objective is not military victory, Junho told his soldiers as they prepared for deployment. Our objective is education. We want survivors who can carry our message back to every remaining Calvarian world. The strike team launched in ships so advanced they could pass through any defensive system without being detected. Their target was not the Calvarian fleet, but the homeworld capital where Council Prime Heiwan still maintained the pretense of civilian government. On Calvos Prime, Council Prime Heiwan watched reports of the suicide fleet with growing despair. She had lost all control over her own military, and War Chief Dong-Su was leading their entire species toward extinction rather than accept human terms. The irony was that the human terms were incredibly generous: autonomy for all Calvarian worlds, continued self-government for civilian populations, and restrictions only on military capabilities. But the warrior castes would rather die than accept such conditions. Council Prime, we are detecting unknown energy signatures throughout the capital, reported her security chief. Multiple contacts moving through our defensive grid without triggering any alarms. Before Heiwan could respond, the chamber doors opened and Colonel Junho entered with a small team of human soldiers. Their equipment was so advanced it seemed almost magical, and their presence in the most secure building on Calvos Prime demonstrated human capabilities more clearly than any weapon. Council Prime, I bring greetings from President Song, Junho said politely. We are here to offer you one final opportunity for peace. Heiwan stared at the humans in amazement. How did you get past our defenses? The same way we have been monitoring your civilization for the past century, Junho replied. We have been here all along, Council Prime. We could have ended your empire at any moment, but we preferred to give you every possible chance to choose cooperation over conflict. The human colonel activated a holographic projector that filled the chamber with images from across Calvarian space. The displays showed human observation posts on dozens of worlds, intelligence-gathering operations that had been running for decades, and technological demonstrations that could eliminate entire star systems. This is impossible, Heiwan whispered. You are supposed to be a primitive species that only recently achieved spaceflight. Junho smiled sadly. That is what we wanted you to believe, Council Prime. Humans learned long ago that other species respond better to demonstrations of superiority than to threats of conquest. The holographic display changed to show recordings of Elder Tayman's warnings to the High Council, Prophet Insu's historical archives, and Admiral Sung Ho's desperate attempts to convince his government of human capabilities. Your own people tried to warn you, Junho continued. The information was available. The choice was always yours to make. Meanwhile, the Calvarian suicide fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system, and War Chief Dong Su prepared for humanity's final lesson. Earth hung before them like a blue jewel, apparently defended by fewer than 100 human ships. All vessels, commence final attack, Dong Su commanded. We will show the galaxy that Calvarians do not surrender. The massive fleet accelerated toward Earth in perfect formation, their weapons charging for what they believed would be the most glorious battle in their species' history. But as they approached the inner system, something impossible began to happen. The space around them filled with human ships that materialized from apparent emptiness. Not hundreds of vessels, but thousands. Fleet after fleet of ships using technology so advanced they could remain completely invisible until they chose to reveal themselves. Admiral Park watched from her command ship as the true scope of human military power became visible for the first time. The defense fleet surrounding Earth contained more vessels than every other species in the galaxy combined, each one equipped with capabilities that made Calvarian technology look primitive. War Chief Dong Su, this is Admiral Park of the United Earth Defense Force, she transmitted to the enemy flagship. You have 10 minutes to surrender your vessels before we demonstrate why every previous galactic civilization chose cooperation over conflict. On the bridge of his flagship, War Chief Dong Su stared at tactical displays showing human forces that outnumbered his fleet by more than 10 to 1. Every ship in the human armada was broadcasting energy signatures that suggested weapons capable of destroying entire planets. War Chief, we cannot possibly fight against such numbers, reported his tactical officer. Dong Su had known this moment would come. The ancient archives had prepared him for exactly this demonstration. Signal all ships. We surrender. The words felt like poison in his mouth, but the alternative was the complete extinction of his species. Honor was important, but survival was more important. Back on Calvos Prime, Council Prime Haiwan received news of the fleet's surrender with mixed emotions. Relief that her species would survive, but horror at the complete scope of human deception. How long have you been watching us? She asked Colonel Junho. Since your species first achieved interstellar flight, he replied honestly. We have been present during every major decision your civilization has made for the past 2 centuries. The implications were staggering. Human influence had shaped Calvarian development in ways they could not begin to understand. Every technological advancement, every military doctrine, every political decision had been observed and analyzed by a species that possessed capabilities beyond imagination. Why? Haiwan asked. Why reveal yourselves now? Because your military was preparing to attack other species that humans consider under their protection, Junho explained. We could not allow that to happen. President Song's final message was broadcast simultaneously to every Calvarian world, every refugee fleet, and every military commander who had survived the demonstrations. Her words were simple but carried the weight of absolute certainty. The Calvarian Empire is now under the protection of the United Earth government. Your worlds will maintain full autonomy under human oversight. Your military capabilities will be restricted but not eliminated. Your species will continue to exist and prosper, but you will no longer threaten other civilizations. The message continued with details of the new arrangement, but the key points were clear. Calvarians who accepted human protection would be treated as valued allies. Those who continued to resist would simply disappear, as had happened to every other species that forced humans to demonstrate their full capabilities. Elder Tayman sat in his dwelling on Refuge Prime, watching the conclusion of events he had tried to prevent for decades.